The Batman identity is the most replicated ID in DC Comics. It doesn't spread through radioactive accidents or divine selection. It spreads through will. Every version of Batman you've ever read about got there by deciding, usually in the aftermath of something devastating, that they were going to become the most dangerous thing in the room and point that at the people who hurt others. What changes between each variant is the shape of that devastation, the world they're operating in, and what the mission cost them. Today we go through every major Batman variant in the comics, and we put you inside each one. Bruce Wayne, Earth Zero/New Earth. You are 8 years old when Thomas and Martha Wayne are shot in Crime Alley by a mugger named Joe Chill, and the moment your parents hit the pavement is the moment the rest of your life gets decided. You don't process it as grief right away. You process it as a problem. The world is unjust, the city is broken, and you are currently too small and too powerless to do anything about either of those things. So you spend the next 15 years fixing the second part. You travel the world. You train under every master of martial arts, escape artistry, criminology, and forensic science you can find. You study at the feet of Henri Ducard, learn pressure point combat from masters in Korea, survive conditions in the Himalayas that would end most soldiers. You return to Gotham a living weapon with a graduate-level understanding of criminal psychology, chemistry, and investigation, and the first night you go out as yourself, you nearly get killed. A bat crashes through the window while you're bleeding on your father's desk and gives you the answer. Criminals are a cowardly and superstitious lot. You need to be something they fear. Your power set is entirely self-constructed. The peak human physical conditioning, strength, speed, agility, endurance, is the result of decades of obsessive training. The detective intellect is the result of the same. You carry a utility belt loaded with gadgets you designed yourself. Batarangs, explosive gel, grapple gun, smoke pellets, forensic tools, rebreathers. The cowl contains a communications array and heads-up display. The cape is memory cloth that stiffens on electrical charge for gliding. Nothing was given to you. Every single component of what you are was built from the ground up by someone who decided that not being enough was not an acceptable outcome. What being you actually costs is the thing the comics keep returning to. You are not well. The mission is not healthy. You have pushed away Bruce Wayne until the mask is more real than the face, and the people who love you, Alfred, Dick, Barbara, Jason, Tim, Damian, are perpetually negotiating with someone who has designed himself to not need anyone. You are the world's greatest detective and the most emotionally inaccessible person in a city full of criminals. You have contingency plans for your own contingency plans. You have a satellite that can disable every superhero on Earth because you cannot stop preparing for betrayal. The bat is the shape your grief took when it had 15 years and unlimited resources to mature. And it never fully stops. Dick Grayson, Batman. You became Robin the night the flying Graysons fell. Your parents, John and Mary, killed by a drop of acid on the trapeze wire on the orders of Tony Zuko while you were 8 years old and the whole circus watched. Bruce Wayne saw it happen and recognized what he was looking at. Himself, smaller and more recent. He took you in, trained you, and built you into the best Robin there's ever been, which is both a gift and a weight you'll spend decades figuring out how to carry. You become Batman not because you wanted it, but because Gotham needed it. When Bruce is broken by Darkseid's Omega sanction and declared dead, Dick steps into the cowl at the request of the people who depend on it. The city, the allies, and a 10-year-old boy named Damian Wayne who needs a Batman who can actually reach him. You do it with a Damian as your Robin, which is the most difficult partnership in the history of the role, because Damian was raised by assassins and doesn't understand why you won't just kill people. Your Batman is measurably different from Bruce's in the ways that matter. You are a natural acrobat. The circus training gives you a movement style that's more fluid and airborne than Bruce's methodical ground-based combat. You also smile under the mask. You make quips. You extend warmth to civilians in ways Bruce treats as inefficiencies. You are a better people person, a worse obsessive, and you run the city with a different temperature. You solve cases that require human connection rather than just forensic brutality. You're not trying to be Bruce. You are trying to be what Gotham needs while Bruce is gone, and those turn out to be slightly different things. What carrying the cowl costs you specifically is the constant weight of legitimacy. Everyone, the villains, the allies, even civilians who pay attention, knows you're not Bruce. You operate in his shadow even while wearing his symbol, And the psychological pressure of that, combined with managing Damian's violence and keeping the network running, is an exercise in doing the hardest job in Gotham without ever being fully credited with it. You do it anyway. That's the most Dick Grayson thing about the whole situation. Jason Todd, Red Hood/Batman. You are the Robin who died. The Joker beat you with a crowbar in a warehouse in Ethiopia, and the bomb he left finished the job, and Bruce arrived too late. You were 15. The thing that comes back from the Lazarus pit years later is still you. Your memories, your skills, your face. But the death and the resurrection and the discovery that Bruce didn't kill the Joker in response have rewired something fundamental in you that cannot be unwired. When you briefly take on the Batman identity during the battle for the cowl, the chaotic period after Bruce's apparent death when multiple people are fighting over who wears the cowl, your version of Batman is what Bruce's would look like if you removed the no-killing rule and replaced it with something colder. You use guns. You break bones past the point of necessity. You operate from a place of rage that Bruce always contained and you have never fully learned to contain. And the result is a Batman that Gotham's criminals fear on a completely different frequency. Not because you might beat them, but because they genuinely cannot predict how far you'll go. Your skills are legitimate. Bruce trained you himself, and then the League of Assassins finished what Bruce started after the resurrection, which means your combat capability is at a level that lets you hold your own against opponents who stagger most Batmen. You are a gifted tactician, a skilled marksman, and you carry the detective training even if you apply it with less patience than Bruce would. The utility belt is there. The cape is there. What isn't there is the philosophical architecture that keeps Bruce from crossing lines. What being you means in the context of the Batman identity is a permanent argument with what the symbol is supposed to stand for. You believe Bruce's method is a slow form of negligence, that refusing to kill the Joker is choosing the Joker's potential future victims over the lives he's already taken. That argument doesn't make you wrong. It makes you the version of this identity that was forged in the specific failure of Bruce's mercy, and you will never stop making the case. You wear the bat when you have to. You wear the hood when you have the choice. Tim Drake, Batman. You figured out Bruce Wayne was Batman on your own when you were 9 years old, piecing it together from news footage and Dick Grayson circus records with the same deductive methodology that Bruce applies to crime scenes. You walked into the Batcave with that information and offered your services because you had already determined that Bruce needed a Robin and were prepared to make the case. Bruce said no. You made the case anyway. He said no again. You kept going until the answer changed, which is the most Tim Drake thing that has ever happened. You take on the Batman identity in a potential future timeline, most significantly in the Titans Tomorrow arc, where a version of you from 10 years ahead has become a Batman that the other future Titans openly fear. This future Tim became Batman after Bruce's death, but the version that emerges is colder and more absolute than anyone expected from the most emotionally measured Robin in the family. You built a Batcave beneath Alcatraz. You operate with a ruthlessness that suggests the analytical mind that once kept the mission Humane has, without Bruce's presence to balance it, tipped fully into the logic of pure effectiveness. In the present, your contribution to the Batman legacy is intellectual architecture. You are the Robin who kept Bruce sane during the years after Jason's death, when the grief was making Bruce dangerous. You are the detective's detective. Your mind works laterally and persistently in ways that complement Bruce's more aggressive frontal approach. You designed systems, built contingencies, and ran operations that kept the Batman network functional across periods when it should have collapsed. What defines your relationship to the Batman identity is the awareness of what it does to people. You watch Bruce, you watch Dick, you watch Jason. You know the cost more clearly than any of them did going in, and you chose it with open eyes anyway. That makes your Batman the most deliberate one. The one who became this exact thing on purpose, fully informed, which is either the most heroic version of the choice or the most troubling one, depending on how you look at it. Damian Wayne, Batman. You were grown in a lab from Bruce Wayne's DNA and Talia al Ghul's, raised in the League of Assassins, trained in combat before you could read English fluently, and delivered to your father at 10 years old as both a gift and a grenade. Your entire childhood was a preparation for a destiny that Bruce spent years trying to redirect. Not away from heroism, but away from the specific brand of it that ends with a body count. You become Batman in the future timeline most fully realized in the Batman 666 issues, a version of you that sold your soul to the devil in exchange for a Gotham that would never burn, and operates as a Batman who kills without hesitation, stores his villains in a basement, and has built himself into something closer to a force of nature than a person. This Batman does not agonize. He calculates. The emotional infrastructure that complicated every other Batman's mission has been stripped down to function. The result is terrifyingly effective and deeply alone. Your physical capability exceeds Bruce's at your peak. Trained from birth specifically for combat in a way Bruce was not. Without the years of self-teaching and improvisation that shaped Bruce's style, you fight with a compressed brutality that reflects the League's methods. You are faster to escalate and slower to de-escalate, and the conscience that Bruce installed in you, the one that makes you Robin rather than an assassin, is the part that costs you the most effort to maintain, because it was grafted onto a foundation that was already built the other way. What being you means is the weight of being two things at once, the product of the League of Assassins and the son of Bruce Wayne, and the permanent negotiation between those two inheritances. Every version of Damian Wayne is that negotiation in a different phase. The one that becomes Batman is the one where Bruce's influence survives long enough to take the mission, but not long enough to soften the methods. You are the most dangerous Batman in the family line, and the one who most needs the thing the cowl was never designed to provide, someone to come home to. Thomas Wayne, Flashpoint Batman. In this world, it was Bruce who died in Crime Alley. The mugger's bullet found your son instead of you, and what Thomas Wayne became in the years after that night is the version of Batman that Bruce Wayne's Batman was always one tragedy away from. You operate without the no-killing rule, without the theatrical restraint, without the careful cultivation of fear over harm. You operate as a man with nothing left to protect and everything left to avenge. Your Gotham is darker than Bruce's because you made it that way deliberately. You run a casino empire as your cover. You have no Robin, no Batgirl, no extended family. The whole architecture of support that Bruce built around himself doesn't exist here because you never thought to build it. You are not trying to inspire. You are not trying to rehabilitate criminals or give children hope. You are trying to burn the criminal infrastructure of Gotham to the ground before you die, which you expect to happen sooner rather than later and have made your peace with. Your combat style is brutal in a way that reflects both the military background Thomas Wayne carries and the complete absence of the self-imposed rules that slow Bruce down. You fight to incapacitate permanently. You carry firearms. The costume is darker and the cape longer, and the overall silhouette is something that criminals in this Gotham have learned to run from on sight. Not because they believe you'll stop before going too far, but because they know you won't. When Barry Allen arrives in the Flashpoint timeline and tells you about Bruce, that in the real timeline Bruce survived, that Bruce became Batman, that Bruce built something extraordinary out of the same night that destroyed you, Thomas Wayne breaks in the way that only a father reading his son's history could break. He writes Bruce a letter. He tells him not to be Batman. He tells him to be happy. And then he keeps fighting because the mission doesn't stop just because you found a reason to want something different. You die in that timeline protecting a future that won't remember your name. That's the most Batman thing in any version of this story. Batman Beyond, Terry McGinnis. You are a teenager in Neo Gotham 2039, and the city has changed in ways that would be unrecognizable to Bruce Wayne. Megalithic corporations, neural interfaces, street gangs with spliced animal DNA, and the old Batman, a memory that most people treat as mythology. You find your way into the Batcave by accident and desperation, steal the suit to avenge your father's murder, and the man you steal it from, old, retired, kept alive by a pacemaker and decades of punishment, decides to let you keep going. The suit you inherit is a technological generation beyond anything Bruce built for himself. It grants you full flight capability through retractable wings. It has built-in cloaking that renders you functionally invisible. The strength enhancement built into the suit pushes you into a physical range that raw training alone never could, which is relevant because Terry McGinnis is not Bruce Wayne. He is a gifted and determined kid, but he did not spend 15 years training under global masters, and the suit accounts for that gap. You also carry a communications link to Bruce, who guides missions from the cave and functions as something between a mentor, a tactical operator, and an increasingly complicated father figure. Your rogues gallery is Neo Gotham's own. Blight, the Joker's gangs, Shriek, Inque. Threats that are products of the city's specific technological and corporate pathologies, rather than the psychological archetypes Bruce spent his career fighting. You approach them differently because you are differently built. You are impulsive where Bruce was methodical, socially functional where Bruce was isolated, and you have a girlfriend, a mother, and a little brother. connections that Bruce's version of this life systematically eliminated over decades. What defines your Batman is the inheritance question. Terry McGinnis becomes Batman without choosing to be Bruce Wayne. He builds a version of the identity that fits who he actually is rather than stripping himself down to the mission. The later revelation that Bruce Wayne's DNA was used to father Terry without his or his mother's knowledge complicates this, adding a biological layer to an already layered identity. But by that point, it doesn't change anything. Terry McGinnis is Batman because of what he decided in the moments that counted, not because of whose cells he carries. Dark Knight Returns Batman, Earth 31. You are 55 years old and you have been retired for a decade when the city finally pulls you back. Bruce Wayne put the cowl away 10 years ago after Jason Todd died, spent a decade watching Gotham rot from inside a bottle and behind a corporate persona, and the mutant gang's escalating brutality makes it clear that the city is not going to save itself. You put the suit back on. Your knees hurt. Your heart is medically compromised. You do not care. The Batman you become in this second act is not the Batman of your youth. You are slower, heavier, and running on a body that has accumulated 40 years of the physical punishment that the career demands. What you've gained is the experience, a tactical intelligence that has processed decades of criminal behavior and has none of the illusions of your younger self. You build a new Robin in Carrie Kelly, a 13-year-old girl who finds you in the field and refuses to leave, which is a decision that horrifies everyone around you and turns out to be exactly correct. You retrain, you rebuild. You put the mutant leader in the mud in front of his own gang and break him publicly and methodically, not quickly. Your final confrontation with Superman, sent by a government that has decided your existence is inconvenient, is the defining tactical statement of everything you are. You prepare for years for the possibility of fighting Clark Kent. You build a suit of powered armor. You synthesize a kryptonite arrow. You fight dirty, use the environment, and push a physically superior opponent to his limit. Not because you can match his power, but because you have thought about this longer and more specifically than he has. You let him believe he won. You had already planned the next phase. This Batman is what the idea looks like at its endpoint. A man who has given everything to the mission for so long that the mission and the man have become indistinguishable. You are not protecting hope in this version of the story. You are protecting something starker and more stubborn, the refusal to let the city die without a fight. The teeth are still there at 55. The darkness is deeper, and the cape still works. Batman who laughs. Bruce Wayne / Dark Multiverse. You are what happens when the Joker wins. Not by killing Bruce Wayne, but by making him into himself. In the Dark Multiverse's Earth -22, the Joker engineers a final gambit. He infects his own heart with a toxin and forces Batman to kill him, releasing a mutagenic pathogen that begins rewriting Bruce Wayne's brain chemistry. Over 72 hours, the toxin dismantles the inhibitory architecture of the prefrontal cortex, the part that maintained restraint, mercy, and moral framework, and replaces it with the Joker's specific brand of nihilistic clarity. Bruce Wayne's mind, intelligence, and capability remain intact. The governor on what he'll do with them is removed. The first thing you do is kill the Justice League. Not in a fight. You plan it, you prepare for every contingency the way you always have, and you execute it with the efficiency that was always there underneath the mercy. Then you kill Gotham's villains, then its corrupt officials, then everyone you've decided has disqualified themselves from existence. You do all of this with the full resources of the world's greatest detective and the complete absence of the thing that made those resources safe for the world to be around. Your power set in this form is the full Bruce Wayne kit with a layer of Joker toxin capability added. You can infect others with a glance through your eyes, which you keep covered with a spiked visor to prevent accidental contagion and control deliberate deployment. You assemble the Dark Knights, the failed Batman of the Dark Multiverse, and operate as their general. You are the most dangerous thing the DC Universe has encountered in the Dark Knights. Metal event, not because of what you can do physically, but because you are Bruce Wayne thinking like the Joker, which means every plan has 17 backup plans, and none of them involve unnecessary risk. What the Batman who laughs represents is the answer to the question everyone asked about Batman eventually. What if he just stopped holding back? The answer, it turns out, is not liberating. It is a man who has lost the only thing that made his power something other than a catastrophe waiting to happen. The choice not to use it without restraint. The laugh is the sound of that choice being removed. And it is the most frightening noise in the multiverse. Dawnbreaker, Bruce Wayne / Dark Multiverse. You are the Batman who received a Green Lantern ring on the night of your parents' murder. The ring sought out the most fearless individual in the sector at the exact moment that Joe Chill's bullet ended everything. And what it found was a child so consumed by grief and rage that he was beyond fear entirely. Not because he had mastered it, but because there was nothing left in him at that moment except the need to act. The ring chose correctly by its own logic and catastrophically by every other measure. The ring in normal hands requires will, and the construction of hard light constructs from positive intention. In your hands, the grief corrupted the connection. You didn't build things with the ring, you consumed things. The darkness in the constructs deepened until they were capable of draining light itself, and the Lantern Corps realized too late that they had empowered something that was going to hollow out its sector. You were imprisoned and you escaped and you continued, because you are still Bruce Wayne and stopping is not in the architecture. Your Batman exists at the intersection of the ring's infinite power and the specific darkness that the trauma of that alley never resolved. You don't carry a utility belt. The ring is everything, generating whatever the mission requires out of constructs that are darker and hungrier than any Green Lantern's output should be able to produce. Flight, constructs, energy blasts, shields, all available, all running through the filter of a grief that was never processed because the ring arrived before the child had a chance to become a person first. What being you means is the clearest illustration of what the Batman origin becomes when the training years are skipped and the power arrives immediately. Bruce Wayne spent 15 years turning grief into discipline. You turned grief into something with a ring on its finger and no inhibitions about how far the darkness goes. The Dawnbreaker is what Batman looks like when the mission starts before the man is ready for it. Vampire Batman, Earth 43. In this world, Batman's pursuit of justice led him into the path of Dracula, and what began as a mission to protect Gotham ended with Bruce Wayne's transformation into something that can no longer be entirely separated from the predator he set out to destroy. You are the Bat who became too much like the thing he hunted. Your capabilities as a vampire Batman are a grotesque amplification of what you already were. The strength, speed, and sensory capability are pushed into supernatural ranges. You can hear a heartbeat through a wall, move faster than human perception tracks cleanly, and survive damage that would kill a baseline human outright. The cape and cowl remain, and so does the detective intelligence, which means you are applying an enhanced predator's toolkit to the same forensic precision that defined your career before the bite. You are, objectively, more capable now. You are also dangerous in a way that has nothing to do with criminals and everything to do with what you now need to survive. The blood hunger is the thing the utility belt cannot solve. You have tried to contain it. Bat blood, criminal blood taken only from those you've deemed forfeit, increasingly desperate workarounds, and none of them hold permanently. What you are is a Batman whose greatest enemy is now internal. Not the Joker, not Ra's al Ghul, but the thing your own body demands of you every night, which is in direct and unresolvable conflict with everything the symbol stands for. The arc of Vampire Batman across his appearances is ultimately a tragedy about the limits of will. Bruce Wayne built himself into someone who could master almost anything through determination. The vampire transformation is the one modification his determination cannot fully contain. What he does with that, how he holds the line, how he fails, and what he asks the people around him to do when he can no longer hold it, is the version of the Batman story that asks what the mission costs when the enemy is inside the suit. Pirate Batman, Captain Leatherwing. You are Christopher Leatherwing, captain of the Flying Fox in the 17th century, and the Batman mythos in this version has been relocated to the Age of Sail without losing anything essential. Your parents were killed by the corrupt nobleman Rolf Rotter on the orders of a man who wanted their fortune, and what you built from that grief was a pirate vessel, a crew of outcasts, and a mission to terrorize those who exploit the powerless across the Caribbean and the Atlantic trade routes. Your costume is a variation on the Bat motif adapted for the period. Dark cape, bat-faced mask, the silhouette recognizable to anyone who knows the original even transposed 2 centuries back. Your weapons are the flintlock, the cutlass, and the crew of the Flying Fox, who function as a period-accurate version of the extended Batman family. Loyal, capable, each bringing something the captain alone cannot provide. You fight with the close-quarters brutality of a man trained for deck combat, where there is no room for precision and everything is momentum. The rogues gallery in this version is corsairs, corrupt colonial officials, and the specific predatory class of wealth that the 17th century generated in the intersections of empire and trade. You are not protecting a city. You are protecting the people the city builders exploit, which is functionally the same mission transposed onto open water. The Flying Fox is the Batcave with sails. What Captain Leatherwing illustrates about the Batman idea is how portable the core really is. Strip away Gotham, the Batmobile, the utility belt, and the specific post-industrial setting, and what remains is a man shaped by the murder of his parents, who weaponized his grief into protection for others. That survives being moved to the 1600s entirely intact. The Bat is the constant. The sea is just another darkness to operate in. Batman, Elseworlds/Gotham by Gaslight. You are Bruce Wayne in 1889, Victorian London transplanted to Gotham, and the world you're operating in has the machinery of the industrial age without the forensic science, communications infrastructure, or legal architecture that Bruce's 20th century mission depends on. You were trained in Europe, studied under the best scientific minds of the Victorian era, and returned to Gotham to wage a war on crime in a city still lit by gas lamps, where the gap between the privileged and the desperate is architectural and absolute. Your batsuit in this world is leather and fabric rather than advanced polymers, and the utility belt is a Victorian inventor's toolkit. Gas grenades, a grapple, bladed batarangs that look like they came from the same metalsmith who made surgical instruments for the city's finest hospitals. The detective work runs on the same engine as always. Observation, deduction, pattern recognition, but the tools are the microscope and the telegraph rather than the computer and the satellite. You are Sherlock Holmes with a trauma response and a personal mission. The defining story of this version is your investigation of Jack the Ripper, who in this continuity is operating in Gotham. The forensic challenge of hunting a killer with no DNA analysis, no digital records, and no CCTV forces your detective methodology back to its most fundamental components: physical evidence, witness testimony, and the deductive architecture that Bruce's intelligence runs on regardless of the century. You identify the Ripper. You confront him. The ending is not comfortable, but Victorian Gotham was never a comfortable setting. What Gaslight Batman says about the character is that the investigative intelligence is the irreducible core. You can take away the technology, move the setting back a century, change every tactical tool in the belt, and what remains is the same detective operating with the same driven precision. The gas lamps change the atmosphere, the mind works exactly the same. Batman, DC 1,000,853rd century. You are the Batman of the 853rd century, a member of Justice Legion A, operating in a solar system that would be unrecognizable to Bruce Wayne, and yet runs on the same principles he established. The Batman identity at this point in DC history has been passed down through generations for over 85,000 years. And what reaches the 853rd century is a figure operating from a Batcave at the core of the sun, with capabilities and resources that make 20th century Bruce Wayne's arsenal look like the contents of a coat pocket. Your physical capabilities are augmented by future technology to a degree that blurs the line between the self-constructed vigilante and something approaching divinity. The cowl interfaces directly with computing systems that span the solar system. The cape is capable of warping local space-time. Your training is the accumulated martial wisdom of 85 millennia of Batman successors, compressed and downloaded into a mind that is still, recognizably, the detective's mind. The one that observes, deduces, and acts on evidence rather than assumption. The rogues you face operate on a corresponding scale. Threats to the entire solar system rather than a single city. Criminals whose operations span planets and dimensional barriers. The essential approach remains unchanged. You prepare obsessively. You know your enemies better than they know themselves, and you hit them at the moment and from the angle they didn't see coming. The bat symbol on the chest of the 853rd century Batman serves the same psychological function it always has, just broadcasting across a larger frequency. What this version represents in the Batman mythology is the logical endpoint of Bruce Wayne's idea. If you build something worth keeping, and if the people who inherit it understand what it's actually for, it survives. The 1 million Batman is proof that the mission Bruce ran out of Crime Alley, grief, and obsessive determination was not a temporary fix but a template. The Bat adapted. The Bat endured. That's the most optimistic thing the character's mythology ever manages to say.